The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're so pleased to have 4 members from the House of Delegates representing Henrico County. Delegate Peter Farrell, good to see you, sir.
Nice to see you, Woody. How you doing?
Good. Delegate John O'Bannon, one of 4 doctors in the Virginia State Legislature, good to see you.
Good morning.
Delegate Riley Ingram, good to see you, sir.
Woody, good to see you.
And Delegate Jimmy Massie, great to have you here.
Thank you for having us, Woody.
Delegate Massie, you've been a leader in education for a number of years, and I know you have some legislation regarding school choice. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Woody. I mean, our caucus, the House Republican Caucus, are huge believers in parental school choice. And what that really means is parents are in the best position to know their child and to know what education alternative would best educate that child. So as public policy makers, what we've been about is giving those parents a broad range of choices. Great public schools, great IB programs, great governor schools, charter schools, virtual schools, homeschool alternative, on and on. Those are things we want to do, and we want to get the money to follow the parents' decision. So we're going to have a big school choice year this year. We've got the second enactment of the charter school constitutional amendment going on. Dickie Bell's got a virtual school bill. Dave LaRock's got an education savings account bill, and I'm improving my education improvement scholarship bill this year. So I think all 4 of those issues are going to be moved forward this session, and I think we're going to do a lot to improve parents' choices about where they can best educate their children.
Now, that charter school constitutional amendment is a result of the fact that the State Board of Education now has the authority to determine whether there will be charter schools. I take it that will allow local school districts to make that determination.
Well, actually, it's the reverse.
Opposite.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the problems has been the local school boards have had the authority to decide whether or not a charter school can come up in their district.
Okay.
And so that's been an obstacle, I think. So we're actually going to take it and give it to the Department of Education and help them. I think we'll get better and more charter schools that way.
Great. Delegate Ingram, you had a contested election for this past time, in a long time, and I'm sure you heard some of these issues about education, especially
Yes.
in terms of choice.
Very much so, Woody. Going out knocking on doors. People that I've talked to, they do want choice. They want their children, like Jimmy said, to have a choice in schools and things. But Woody, you're right. The first time I had opposition in 20 years, so I had to get out there and work. And I met with the lady that ran against me, and we met for breakfast. And she said, "You really work." She said, she said, "I didn't think you'd work." I told her that she ruined my summer, but anyway, but it was a good race, and we did good. Woody, this year I have a little bill that I didn't think would be very controversial, and what it is a lady in my district has been to the emergency room 2 times because of the restaurants or places that serve food. They cook the chicken or pork chops in the same oil that they cook seafood, and they're allergic to seafood, and so therefore my little bill, all it says is that they would have to have either a separate deep fryer for cooking fish. That's all it does. Yeah, or either, I'm going to probably amend it to say that either that or disclose the fact so that they would know. But all in all, I enjoy serving the people of the district, and my district is diversified, part of Hopewell, Prince George, Chesterfield, and Henrico County.
Great. And Dr. O'Bannon, good to see you, as we indicated earlier. What are some of your goals and objectives this session?
So I want to thank Comcast and VCTA for doing this. We are finishing our 2nd week. Riley's bill is a great example. We probably have close to 1,400 bills in the House, probably 1,000 in the Senate.
Our goal is to dispense with all those bills and balance our budget and leave town on time on March 12th, 12th or 14th. But I've been interested in health care, as you know. I actually have a really, what I think is a really good bill, where some high school seniors from Tucker High School got in touch with me over the issue of texting while driving. And they specifically asked me, they'd done the research, they thought an answer to this was to raise the penalty. So I did exactly what they asked me to do. I filed a bill to raise the penalty for texting while driving. Also got some bills on transparency in healthcare and regulatory reform in healthcare. So we'll have a good session.
Great. Delegate Farrell, I'm sure you're hearing from constituents, and many of the ideas that result in legislation come from constituents.
Well, actually, that's a really good point, and I was actually going to mention that before you even asked it, because with John's story about students bringing a bill, you'd be surprised how many good pieces of legislation literally come from a citizen calling and saying, do you guys realize what's going on? For instance, it may sound like a simple bill, but I did not know until a constituent called me over the summer that you actually, if you were a mechanic, if you owned a auto repair shop, unless you followed very specific guidelines, you could not accept appointments for state inspections.
You're kidding me.
No, so that's what I said. So it's amazing, things like that. We're a part-time legislature. You know, we have full-time jobs or are retired, and so we actually work too. So we depend on citizens for input. And I would say the system actually works very well. So I put a bill in saying, if you own an auto repair shop and you want to take appointments for state inspections, go ahead. You know, it shouldn't be our business to dictate your appointment book. So you'd be surprised how many, I've carried bills in the past having to do with more serious issues such as sexual assault on minors and their victim rights as far as knowing what's going on in the process throughout the judicial system. So you'd be surprised, it happens a lot. Citizens actually are the cause of good pieces of legislation all the time.
Talk to us about tax credits. I believe you have some legislation relating to tax credits.
I have a couple to trim some, actually, it doesn't happen a lot down here. One is actually the state of Virginia has been giving a tax credit for political contributions, which I don't think any tax dollars should be subsidizing that. So we'll be trying to get rid of that. Another one is certainly, and I've been guilty of this in the past too, we've passed a lot of tax credits under the guise of, well, they're for jobs. Well, that's true, they may be, but some of them we actually need to do a little better job of actually vetting and see who's receiving them. For instance, there's a quote-unquote angel investor tax credit that we give now, which in theory is a good thing, but federal law actually dictates who those investors get to be in those companies. And essentially you have to be wealthy to invest in instruments that angel investor tax credit would apply for. So I got an issue with Virginians subsidizing to the tune of $5 million a year for wealthy people to make risky venture capital investments. So we'll be looking at that as well.
So that would disallow, I take it, the current regime, a number of us who aren't wealthy getting together and crowdfunding.
Well, now crowdfunding will be authorized. See, now this is where it gets complicated. Crowdfunding, if it's a company outside of Virginia, that's all regulated by the federal government. Crowdfunding, if it's a Virginia company and they're only taking Virginia investors, then yes, you'll be able to start crowdfunding once the State Corporation Commission finishes their work coming up with the regulations. I think crowdfunding is a good thing, except I am worried about fraud, especially there are no valuation metrics around it. If a guy comes and tells you, Woody, give me $10,000 for 3% of my company, well, what's that 3% based on? You know, do we have good protections around that? I'm not sure yet.
And Delegate Massie, you've been a businessman for a long time. That's your background and experience. Tell us how we're going to create jobs in this new Virginia economy, because we have to wean away ourselves from the federal government. We have a two-year reprieve here in terms of sequestration, but that may come back to bite us again.
Yeah, Woody, that is the number one issue I think the country faces, and actually the number one issue that Virginia faces is economic growth, job creation, and wage growth. Because if we don't have that, you know, we can't defend ourselves, we can't feed our families, we can't educate our kids, and we certainly aren't going to be able to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. So it is the number one issue out there. We are very focused on it here in Virginia. I mean, we're focused on maintaining a very attractive tax environment here in Virginia for new businesses and existing businesses, a very attractive regulatory environment for those same folks. The governor has given us a lot of things to think about in the budget in terms of economic incentives, on our Governor's Opportunity Fund and other places. The Port of Virginia is coming to us for a very large investment down there to try to stimulate economic growth. So on and on and on across the board, tax, regulatory environment, continuing to work on attracting new businesses. The VEDP was in making a presentation yesterday about they would like some more money so they can sell Virginia more around the country, more around the world. So it is the #1 issue, and it's receiving a tremendous amount of attention.
Talk to us a little bit more about the Port of Virginia. It's supposed to be a profit-making entity now?
Well, the Port of Virginia is a for-profit business, owned basically by the state of Virginia. It loads and unloads ships every day, like the alcohol and beverage control. I mean, we buy alcohol at wholesale, sell it at retail. So it is a for-profit business owned by a not-for-profit state of Virginia, basically. So, we ought to be able to do a fairly rigorous analysis of their budget request for, an extra $350 million, just like Riley and I and Peter's family would do in the private business. If you were asking me for $350 million, great. Tell me how much extra revenue that's going to generate, what the associated expenses with that are going to be. The difference between the revenue and the expenses is going to be the return on my $350 million. We ought to hold them to a different standard because they are, in essence, a for-profit business owned by the state of Virginia.
And Riley, that Port of Virginia is a huge economic driver for the economy of the Commonwealth. We've got a lot of these very large ships that are coming to the port now as a result of the enlargement of the Panama Canal. Talk to us about the importance of that in terms of the economy.
That is very important for our economy, and we're in the process now, the Corps of Engineers and everything, they're going to dredge the channel, the Thimble Shoals channel, to 55 feet. And with that dredging, we will be able to take care of those larger ships that come through the Panama Canal. And I'm not sure, but I think it's supposed to open sometime March or April of this year. I think that's right. And that will help a great deal. But the trade industry and the unloading of ships, it does create a lot of jobs. And they have had some bumps in the road, so to speak, but they seem to be doing pretty good now. And getting back to what Jimmy was talking about, we also, with the Governor's Opportunity Fund, we must make sure that we are investing and check the people out, because we had one up in Danville that $1.4 million that we put out that we probably will never get back. We're just hoping we get some of it back, but that's a big issue. But the port does a great job, and economic development is, like Jimmy said, that's something we have to do. So, Woody, I was just going to say one thing. I'm really proud of. We get so many ideas from our people, but this texting and driving this was about a month ago. I was on 295. I came across a running bridge. I'm running 73 miles an hour. I'm in the left lane, and this car comes over, and I'm not even going to say, but anyway, she came over, and I said, "Oh my gosh!" So I backed off. So I went around on the right-hand side. She came over, at least 3 or 4 feet into my lane, 73 miles an hour. And I looked, and she is steady texting and driving. And that is so dangerous. It's not only dangerous to her, but it's dangerous to all of us or anyone else. So I'm so glad to see that come about.
I have to tell you, you see it, I bet every one of us sees it every day. And it's just a big issue, and this was a way forward. I do want to mention one thing on the port, because I think it's important to Richmond. The big vision here is that we have a wonderful natural resource down there, and it competes nicely with the Charlestons and the Savannahs and the New Yorks and Baltimores. We've got 2 railroads, Norfolk Southern and CSX, and they're actually very close, both of them. I think one of them's already there, to double stacking those containers. We have Front Royal, and we now have the Port of Richmond connected to the Norfolk Port. And what they're doing is they're increasing the barges. They're going to use barges up and down the James to get those containers up here to Richmond so they can be dispersed. So it's a good, big vision. I think most of us are very supportive of doing something for it. But in the long run, it's one of those economic development things that would be a marvelous thing for Virginia.
Now, another economic development issue you're working on relates to this certificate of public need that I understand some people view as a real barrier to getting into the medical device business and other ventures in terms of medicine. Talk to us about that legislation.
It's a little bit inside baseball, but what's called certificate of public need is a set of regulations that are legacy regulations that we've had in Virginia for many years. The hospitals use this to compete with each other and inhibit competition. So one of the things that we think we can do to actually improve access so patients don't have to go to the hospital every time to get a test. They can have lower prices if you have better competition, because right now, you know, the bigger these systems get, the more monopolistic they are. So this is just one of those good government, reduced regulation things that I think makes common sense for a lot of us. We've got a lot of things going on in healthcare. We're going to be hearing, you know, Virginia is now losing more citizens to accidental drug overdose than they are car wrecks.
Is that right?
That's a fact. And so we've got to deal with this epidemic of the prescription drugs and the heroin. Administration has come forward with a proposal to partner with the insurance companies and get people who have substance abuse problems, who are addicted, appropriate inpatient services when they need them. I filed a number of things for the McShin Foundation because I think that's a peer review process rather than the medical process. But we've just got to begin to get our hands around that.
Delegate Farrell, I wasn't aware that the drug problem was quite that significant.
It is, especially it's not, and it cuts across demographics and across geography, rural, suburban. I've heard issues with it in high schools. Economically poor, economically wealthy. We have an opiate problem. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And I think we're still trying to learn about how it's distributed, how they're getting a hold of it, how to stop it. So I think you'll see some legislation having to do with that. And John, you know, the health committee sees some of that, and John's really done a good job as a doctor who knows how to properly distribute those drugs, and then what's going on where people are, you know, quite frankly, stealing them from pharmacies probably, as we've seen actually with a couple cases before the pharmacy board. So it's a massive issue that I don't think the public is really seen as it's. I would say it's one of the top issues facing Virginia right now, no question.
Now, what about your local school districts? How are they faring? I know there's additional money in the budgets for K through 12. There are SOL reforms. Talk to us a little bit about those two matters.
Right. I think one, I would say a couple things. We worked pretty hard with the Senate, with the governor's office back in September when we actually had to cut some of the revenues. We were able to keep K through 12 whole. We didn't actually have to cut them, which is good. My school districts are doing pretty well. I have four. One, I have in Louisa County. I have the whole county. It's the one county I have in entirety. I got one high school there. They do a fabulous job. I think that I think they would like to see. One of the things we talk about when the state gives a pay raise to the teachers, there's a little thing that isn't talked about very much where the locals have to decide to match it. So because we don't pay for 100% of it. So they are looking at that and are going to have to calculate that because there is a proposed raise right now, and can the locals match it? That's a big question. So that's the big question I think a lot of them are thinking about right now.
Great. Delegate Massie, I want you to talk a little bit about education as well, but first I wanted to ask you, you three are members of the Appropriations Committee. How much has this storm cost the Commonwealth of Virginia, or do we even know, and what impact, if any, on the budget will that have?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously been a significant weather event all over the state. You know, we've had a pretty warm winter so far. Right. So it's just too early, Woody, to say, you know, what the financial ramifications of it are going to be. But I suspect that we haven't stressed our snow budget till this date. So we're probably in pretty good shape. On education, I mean, you know, again, job creation and education, I think, are the two biggest issues we focus on. And we are going, as Peter said, I'm chairman of the K-12 subcommittee of appropriations, and the governor is proposing some very significant increases in K-12 spending, the 2% raise for the teachers. He's proposing hiring, you know, several thousand new teachers around the state, and we're also talking about speeding up the VRS payments. All those add up to about $460-some million. And then in addition, we have the normal re-benchmarking process, which is another $450 to $60 million. So as Peter's right, on the $450 million, the localities have got, we do, around the state, the average match is 55-45. State puts up 55, localities put up 45. So it's going to be a big question we're asking, can the localities come up with their 45%? And, so those are going to be the three big things, the new teachers, the pay raise, and speeding up the VRS payments.
And go ahead.
And Woody, what I was going to say also, piggybacking on that, on what Jim is talking about, the vocational education is a big part of the budget, and I definitely support that because I think that we need electricians, we need plumbers. My plumber in little Ingram and Associates real estate company, he pulls up other day in a new Hummer, okay? And I'm looking at it, and I said, his name, Little Bill, and I said, Little Bill, man, what a nice looking vehicle that is. He said, Riley, you paid for it. And this man, I mean, I'm serious, our electricians, plumbers, all these that maybe they're not fit, in other words, maybe college is not for them, and I think that I honestly feel that vocational education is something we need to concentrate on, and there's money in the budget for that, which I definitely agree with.
I guess one can afford a Hummer now with gas prices being so low.
That's right.
That helps.
That's right.
Delegate O'Bannon, I know you're a real supporter of education as well, and Delegate Ingram has talked about the necessity to emphasize vocational education. There are a lot of really great community colleges, and talk to us about the importance of them.
So these are great issues. We have workforce development and how we use vocational education, how we use our K through 12 system, link it to the community colleges. But right now, today, there are spots for commercial truck drivers. There are all kind of spots. If we can get a student finishing 12th grade with a certificate, which is the piece of paper they need to go to the next level, that's something we need to nurture. We also need to have that pathway where if you say going to do a little higher like a profession, like a radiology technician, that you can get into that community college system and get that training and get out at a professional level. That'll be a great career for you. It's interesting, it's worth noting, I think, that Raleigh and Peter, who represent multiple jurisdictions, have challenges because each school district is different. Jimmy and I have the luxury of being in Henrico. Henrico has a unified system where if a teacher gets a raise, then a county employee is going to get a raise. And so they have that challenge of how to match that when you get incentives through the educational side to do a teacher raise that the county's then got to look at and decide whether they're going to be able to match that and raise everybody's salary. So those are some of the things we deal with.
And the Virginia retirement system has to be made whole, so to speak. I think we're playing catch up with that a little bit.
Right, and I believe, I'm not on appropriations, but I believe we're actually ahead of schedule of paying back the money that was borrowed a while back when Bob McDonnell was governor. But our pension system compared to other states is actually in very good shape. And I believe the Speaker has a bill in to actually form a commission of what I would call some heavyweight people, including himself, to be on that commission, to really review our retirement system. I'm one, from being a younger person, a lot of people my age and younger, they tend to move around a lot to different jobs. So when you try to handcuff them with a defined benefit plan, that really doesn't work anymore as far as keeping them in the job. They still like to try different things. So having a 401k that can follow them around, a Roth IRA, for instance, needs to be looked at. Now, does that need to be the answer? I don't know yet, and we shouldn't know yet. We got to look at it, but it certainly should be explored.
So portability and mobility is a key.
It's very important in this economy.
There are a lot of lessons from this whole process. We got behind in our pension plan because we didn't fund it one year, and that was in the midst of that terrible downturn.
Sure. Right.
But we're not forced to catch it up. We're learning that there are a limited number of gimmicks, if you will, or ways that we can balance a budget. This is the practical process here. Virginia has to have a balanced budget every year. We can't borrow ahead like your federal government does. So now we're catching up, and we're doing things with the rainy day fund, with some savings. We're using dollars to build things rather than bond. So we're getting away from those gimmicks and getting back to a much sounder structural budget overall. And that's really the goal, so that when we have downturns, we won't have to go back to the gimmicks.
Delegate Massie, Virginia values veterans. We talked a little bit about certificate programs at junior colleges. I believe there is a program, for example, that would allow a veteran returning from a theater of war to earn a certificate based upon experience, so that he or she may be able to pursue employment in that area of expertise.
Yeah, Woody, our veterans in Virginia are extremely important to us. Virginia has 8 million people living in 800,000 number of veterans. So we believe that Virginia is the most veteran-friendly state in the country, and we intend to keep it there. And what you're referring to is when one of our veterans, for instance, has been driving heavy equipment or working a bulldozer for years in the military, we want them to be able to come back over here and not have to start from ground zero to get their certification to run a bulldozer. That doesn't make sense. Put them in the same program with a kid who's never run a bulldozer. The guy's been running a bulldozer, or the gal's been running a bulldozer for years. So we are actually working towards trying to expedite their path towards certifications in all kinds of, you get communications, you've got, got driving heavy equipment, you got all kinds of technology. So we're gonna expedite the veterans' path to getting the certification or the associate's degree of the certification they need to do that work here in the country when they've been doing it for the military.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think all of us are co-patrons on Cox's bill for Veterans Care Center up in Northern Virginia and one down in the Tidewater area, and I think that's very important for the veterans that we have here. And like Jimmy said, we value our veterans, and we like for them to retire here and go to work here and stay here in Virginia.
And Riley is one, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Congratulations. Congratulations. How important is it to maintain the AAA bond rating that the Commonwealth currently has?
It's been our goal. It's coveted, and it is probably one of the top 2 or 3 things that's most important to us. We have done a fair amount of bonding over the last few years. We're always watching that capacity. So I think it's about 4 3/4% or thereabouts. And one of the goals this year will be to not spend it all, if you will, but look at and this is the process. The governor's got lots of zeros in his budget. He likes things, and he invited everybody to come and put an ask in. It's now our job to go and look at all those proposals, from the port to transportation to education to all these things. And so that is very important. It's our top job to balance the budget.
Thank you for being here, Delegate Peter Farrell, John O'Bannon, Riley Ingram, and Jimmy Massie. Thank you.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I am Woody Evans.